Oral questions, questions orales, the Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
In what year will construction begin on a new pipeline to the Pacific?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the world is changing rapidly. The United States, the world's largest economy, is fundamentally reshaping all of its trade relationships, causing major disruption and upheaval for Canadians. Right. It's time to transform our economy from one that is reliant on a single trading partner to one that is stronger, more self-sufficient, and resilient to global shocks. To these ends, Canada and Alberta share the same ambitions: diversify our export markets, make Canada an energy superpower, and build a stronger, cleaner, more independent, more competitive economy.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
All right, he can't tell us the year in which construction will begin. Can he tell us in what decade will construction begin on a new pipeline to the Pacific?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, today is a really important day because we are taking important steps forward on cooperative federalism. The Prime Minister has been clear, and we've always known, we cannot reach our climate objectives if we are not working with all of the provinces and territories. Today, Alberta has committed to work with us on clean electricity regulations. They have committed in this agreement to work towards a stronger industrial carbon price. They have committed to work with us on methane regulations. Those are important steps forward for Canada to move towards its climate objectives, and we will keep doing that work.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So they don't know the year that construction will begin. They don't know the decade that construction will begin. And the Environment Minister couldn't even bring herself to utter the word pipeline in her answer to the question. And what today's deal allows a proposal for a pipeline to go to an office in 7 months, which will then be studied for 2 years, after which the Prime Minister will give a pipeline veto to the BC NDP Premier, who's already said he's against. Isn't this pipeline going to be built in the year never?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Actually, Mr. Speaker, this is a big, large, great, grand day for Canada. Our government has reached an important MOU with Danielle Smith, the Premier, and the province of Alberta that creates an energy transition in all aspects of energy. It sets the stage for an industrial transformation. It will make Canada stronger, more independent, more resilient, and more sustainable, and it will include the largest carbon capture project in the world. It will mean all of Alberta's energy resources are among the lowest energy intensive in the world.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Don't tell us when a pipeline will be under construction. Let's just unpack the Prime Minister's allusion here. He's telling the Keep It in the Ground caucus of the Liberal Party that they just need to be quiet because there won't be a pipeline anyway. What he will do is delay it for several years until after a prospective election, during which he can dangle a possible pipeline in front of the people, but after which he can hand veto power that is not in the Constitution over to the BC NDP Premier, who will block the thing from ever happening. Isn't it true that this isn't a pipeline? It's a pipe dream.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the country, indeed the world, is calling out for serious leadership, for cooperative leadership, for leadership that brings people together and parties together. I don't think this leader has any conception of what is required to do the kind of development that he is proposing. Of course we will consult and deal with the Premier, the duly elected Premier of British Columbia. Of course we will and have a duty to consult with First Nations. Of course we will do this in a cooperative way. We'll do it in the Canadian way, and we'll do it in the right way, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, they will stand in the way, is what they will do. We know that the only thing stopping a pipeline from Alberta to the Pacific is the Prime Minister. Let's unpack the legality of it. The Constitution, Section 9210A, gives the federal government exclusive approval power for a pipeline. Bill C-5 A bill the Prime Minister pushed through the House of Commons, and we even supported him, gives him the power to approve it. So we only need him to do one thing for this pipeline to happen. Get out of the way. Will he do it?
Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, when Canadians elected our government, they were clear. They wanted to see us build a strong Canada, and they wanted to see us build it well and build it together. They wanted to see that we could work together as a country, and that means that we do things like this agreement with Alberta that helps us move forward on industrial carbon pricing, moves forward on methane regulations, moves forward on clean electricity, but also respects other jurisdictions like the province of British Columbia, with which we must seek agreement.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, she accidentally told the truth, Mr. Speaker. She didn't say that it moves forward on a pipeline. She said it moves forward on an industrial carbon tax. A carbon tax that will increase the cost of everything it takes to build a home. So it's a tax on homes. On everything it takes to grow food. So it's a tax on food. It's a tax that drives production out, paychecks down, and the cost of living up. Meanwhile, it does not move forward with a pipeline. We as Conservatives believe in clearing the way to get pipelines built. In other words, we would build a pipeline without a carbon tax. They would build a carbon tax without a pipeline.
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I suspect Canadians are straining to find the Leader of the Opposition credible on any of this. What this Memorandum of Understanding does is create a carbon capture and storage system that will lead the world. It will include, of course, bringing together of partners with whom we have a duty to consult and with other jurisdictions. It will create jobs in the electrical system. It will create construction jobs. It will create opportunity across Western Canada, Mr. Speaker, but most importantly will make Canada an energy superpower. Why can't the Leader of the Opposition see that?
L'Honorable Député de Belleuil.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, on November 27th, today, this government will have completely betrayed climate goals and people who have suffered from climate events. To help the leaders of oil companies who are often American, the Prime Minister has signed an agreement that will force him to ignore the leader of BC, ignore First Nations. So with this happening to BC, will Quebec be next? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, we should not be surprised that the leader of the Bloc Québécois looks for any excuse to sow division within Canada. What we're seeing today is the same thing as we do with Quebec, which is cooperate, work together so that federalism can create economic opportunity. Yes, a renewable energy and climate of opportunity for young people. How can the leader of the Bloc Québécois object to that? The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Let's not even pretend to claim that it could be because they haven't read their own documents. Because if you read it, it's pretty clear. They claim that they want a single Canadian economy, which is not the economy of BC or Quebec, but which instead belongs to Ottawa and Calgary, ignoring legislation, ignoring environmental assessment, ignoring First Nations, ignoring provincial jurisdiction. Ignoring all that, the Prime Minister is going to impose a business plan that only serves oil companies and himself. The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has been very clear here in this House. He stated that we also need an agreement with BC and with First Nations. But in addition, this agreement includes significant commitments to the province of Alberta regarding the industrial carbon pricing system for methane regulations for clean energy, and we will continue to work closely with all provinces in order to fight climate change. The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. It sounds like I just heard the Minister of the Environment say that she agrees with this odious agreement which has abandoned the oil and gas emissions cap and even electricity production within what she just said. Yesterday, I asked whether this government would formally and solemnly promise to never force BC to accept a pipeline or force First Nations to accept it. The government House leader, who often says the opposite of the truth, rose and said yes, he should have simply remained seated. The Honourable Government House Leader. On the contrary, Mr. Speaker, I am getting up. I am standing up. I am standing like all of my colleagues on this side of the House because we have work to do. We have the work of building a nation, working together with provinces, consulting First Nations, and building a climate framework which will enable us to reach net zero by 2050. And we will do that by working with all Canadians from coast to coast to coast. That is what we are going to do. That's what voters asked us to do. And no matter what the Bloc Québécois says, we are here to build Canada strong. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, in Canada's in the Canadian government conflict of interest legislation, when it comes to the regulations that public office holders must respect, it is clearly indicated that to favor a person or organization through a person who has been retained to represent them is not allowed. The federal Liberal member for Laval-les-Îles is currently being investigated by Quebec's chief electoral officer because he participated in Ottawa flim-flammery. Can the Prime Minister confirm that none of his ministers or members are part of that flim-flammery? Next question. The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, I once again am coming back to federal conflict of interest legislation. We know that the federal MP for Laval-les-Îles is currently being investigated by the Quebec Chief Electoral Officer. That is a fact. So my question is simple. Can the Prime Minister confirm that no member of his cabinet or caucus are part of that scandal? The Honourable Government House Leader. Mr. Speaker, that is not a question that has to do with the administration of this government. But I can confirm that all of the members and ministers on this side of the House carefully follow the ethics code, which is one of the strictest in the world.
For Windsor West.
Speaker, people in Windsor are tired of hearing promises. They just want to know why this Prime Minister stopped fighting for them. He said he would go elbows up at the U.S., but when he failed, he shrugged and said, who cares? Workers in Windsor care. Our auto sector and suppliers care. Conservatives care. Meanwhile, the U.S. signed an $80 billion nuclear deal with Brookfield, the Prime Minister's own company. Why is it that every time the Prime Minister travels, business only gets better for Brookfield, while Canadians are left out in the cold?
Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, I find that member's suggestion that the Conservatives care interesting, because the Conservatives voted against 18,000 construction jobs at Darlington Nuclear Project, 9,700 jobs at the Northwest Transmission Line in BC, over 10,000 jobs at the LNG2 facility, 5,000 jobs at the graphite mine in Quebec. These investments represent real progress for workers. So here's something that we should know. Conservatives vote against jobs and Canadians. Our new government stands up for workers and jobs.
The Honourable Member for Windsor West.
Mr. Speaker, last week we found out this government sent 500 million tax dollar payers to the European Space Agency. And guess who owns half the UK campus that money is going to? You guessed it right, Mr. Speaker, Brookfield. All the same time, Windsor workers are being shut out of plants, contracts are stalling, and families are worried about their future. Why is the Prime Minister sending money overseas, helping a company he's tied to, instead of fighting to protect jobs in Windsor, which has the highest unemployment rate in the country, Mr. Speaker?
The Secretary of State for Labour.
That member voted against the largest infrastructure investment in Canadian history, Mr. Speaker. Jobs for the IBEW, jobs for the carpenters, jobs for Leona, jobs for the union members in his riding, Mr. Speaker. We will be building big, building with steel, building with Canadian steel, Canadian lumber, Mr. Speaker. When will the Conservatives get on board with Canadian workers, Mr. Speaker?
L'honorable député de...
Mr. Speaker, there is yet another scandal, Mr. Speaker. In the federal budget, this Liberal government is prioritizing money for modular housing. So is Brookfield. The Prime Minister is prioritizing nuclear energy. So is Brookfield. The Prime Minister is prioritizing funds for rail transport. So is Brookfield. The Prime Minister is prioritizing data storage. And guess what? Brookfield, too. So, Mr. Speaker, why is the Prime Minister sacrificing our national interests for his own personal profit? The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation. Mr. Speaker, every time my colleague rises in the House, I recognize that he has remarkable histrionic qualities, but nonetheless, what he said doesn't make a lot of sense. When his leader was housing minister, he only managed to get 6 units of affordable housing built. On this side of the House, we will be working hard to build affordable housing, to increase housing supply, reducing pressures for first-time buyers. That's good news for Canadians. The Honourable Member for Lévis-Lobinière. I'll give some more examples, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is prioritizing AI, so is Brookfield. The Prime Minister is prioritizing clean energy, so is Brookfield. Last week, we learned that the Liberals put $500 million taxpayer money, gave that money to the European Space Agency. And who owns 50% of the campus? Brookfield, of course. Why is the Prime Minister sending our jobs abroad, our money into space? Why is he placing his own financial interests before those of all Canadians?
L'honorable ministre.
Monsieur le Président, je me demande aux intérêts de qui il pensait quand il a voté contre le budget qui prévoit une baisse d'impôts pour 22 millions de Canadiens, Monsieur le Président, le régime canadien de soins dentaires, l'allocation canadienne pour enfants, des emplois au port de Québec, au port de Saguenay, le développement économique, des emplois dans sa région, au chantier des vies, Monsieur le Président. À qui il pensait certainement pas à son monde. Merci.
Si j'ai bien compris,
Interpretation, the microphone was off. Interpretation will now resume.
Medicine Hat Cardston.
Speaker, the Prime Minister's Brookfield conflicts of interest continue to grow. But keeping his shares, options, and performance pay worth millions of dollars, every major decision the PM says he makes for Canada, like nuclear deals, AI, EU space agencies, and many more, all have the potential to make himself wealthier. While Canadians suffer, business for Brookfield has never been better. When will the Prime Minister admit his conflicts, divest his shares, and prioritize Canadians' best interest rather than his own portfolio investments?
Great question.
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Today, the announcement with the Prime Minister and the Premier of Alberta is good news for workers all across this country. It's good news for workers in Alberta. It's certainly good news for skilled tradespeople and the young apprentices coming up, learning these trades. Mr. Speaker, this is an announcement about prosperity. It's shared prosperity, Mr. Speaker. It scopes in Indigenous people and creates wealth. I certainly hope that member understands this is something that will deeply benefit not just his province, but the entire country.
Député de Repentigny.
The Honourable Member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister's green facade is crumbling now that he's announced another dirty oil pipeline. And beneath that green facade, we're just seeing the black of oil, just as much as with the Conservatives, and perhaps even darker, because over 10 years in power, Stephen Harper did not manage to bring in a pipeline. Whereas the Liberals announced a second one this morning, with perhaps more to come. They seem to have given up completely on meeting their climate emissions targets. When it comes to the environment, are they worse than the Conservatives, or is it all just the same thing? The Honourable Minister of the Environment. Mr. Speaker, I've said it before and I'll say it again. We can only meet our climate targets by working closely with provinces and territories. Canadians elected us because they wanted to see us working with the provinces and territories. And that's what we're doing with this agreement. Alberta has committed to working with us on an industrial carbon price, on methane emissions, and on clean electricity. That is what we have to do to fight climate change, and that's what we will do. The honourable member for Repentigny. Mr. Speaker, it's hard to believe that the Minister of the Environment is defending pipelines. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Let's look at what our so-called Green Prime Minister is doing. He put an end to carbon pricing. He has given up on zero-emission vehicle targets. He has put an end to the emissions cap for the oil and gas sector, billions of dollars in tax credits for fossil fuel, boycotted COP30, given up on environmental assessments for oil projects under C5. And today we have yet another pipeline which will undermine the oil tankers moratorium in a marine protected area. Is this the Liberal government or is this Donald Trump's policy? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canadians elected us to build Canada strong, and that is what we're going to do. Let's look at the projects we've brought forward. We brought in a hydroelectric project in Iqaluit. We brought in a clean electricity project in the northern part of BC. We are going to continue doing the work. Today is yet another time when we are continuing to maintain an industrial carbon price. We are continuing to have methane regulations, clean electricity regulations, not just regulations, but what we are going to build. The honourable member for Richmond North Vaska. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister said, who cares, when asked what was happening to the negotiations with the US. And he backed down on the digital services tax without getting anything in return, at least not for Canadians, because a few days later, the Americans suddenly signed an $80 billion with whom? With Brookfield, the Prime Minister's company. Why is he sacrificing the interests of Canadians and promoting his own? I know what they're going to say. They're going to talk about the budget, pipelines, housing. It's all very well, but they're never going to actually answer my question. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Natural Resources. Mr. Speaker, I have good news for all workers in Canada. The big projects that we're bringing in will generate great jobs throughout the country. Good unionized jobs in all areas. And that will help all of Canada move forward. Thank you.
Member for York Centre.
Who cares? Who cares, said the Prime Minister when asked about contact with the U.S. President on a trade deal. Everyday Canadians care. Everyday Canadians who are going broke or who are losing their jobs because of this trade uncertainty. In my city of Toronto, investment, commerce, and real estate froze. Only 25 new condos were sold last month in a city of 3 million. Other than Brookfield, nobody can make a decision because of the uncertainty caused by this Prime Minister's failure to get a trade deal. So instead of being dismissive and derisive, why doesn't the Prime Minister keep his word and finally get a trade deal?
The Honourable Minister of Jobs and Families.
Yesterday, I stood with the Prime Minister and the President of Dofasco as we announced additional supports for steel, for lumber, Mr. Speaker, for the communities and their organizations and their employees that have been deeply impacted by tariffs. And Mr. Speaker, they're not only encouraged by our support, but they're excited about the future. And you know why, Mr. Speaker? Because they have an opportunity through Buy Canada policies to pivot their products and sell to Canadian projects. And Mr. Speaker, that's what Canadians expect, that we invest in ourselves, that we take care of ourselves, something these guys can't get.
Exactly.
The honourable member for Richmond Hill South.
This Prime Minister went from promising elbows up to throwing his hands up, saying who cares the moment the President pushed back. He caved on the digital services tax, abandoned counter tariffs, and walked away from the softwood legal fight, leaving Canadian workers totally defenseless. We thought he got nothing in return, but it turns out he got nothing for Canadians, because just days later, the Americans signed an $80 billion nuclear deal with his former company, none other, Brookfield. So while Canadian workers are left standing in the penalty box, the Prime Minister's friends are skating away with the puck. Why is this Liberal Prime Minister trading away Canada's national interests while advancing his own personal interests?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, again, that member voted against the budget, which is going to see the largest investment in infrastructure across this great country, Mr. Speaker. We're going to be building homes, building community centers, hospitals, bridges, roads, Mr. Speaker, all with Canadian steel, Canadian lumber, Canadian unionized worker. Mr. Speaker, every day the Conservatives come in here and they vote against jobs and they vote against Canadians.
Member for Kitchener South Hespeler.
Mr. Speaker, that member did not answer the question, so I'm going to ask it again. The Prime Minister caved on counter tariffs, on digital services taxes, on legal disputes with the softwood lumber. We thought he was getting nothing for Canadians, but it turns out he was getting lots for his company, Brookfield. Days after he was in the White House, the Americans signed an $80 billion nuclear reactor deal with Brookfield. Why is it that everywhere the Prime Minister goes, Brookfield gets a sweet deal and Canadians get no deal? Why?
Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Mr. Speaker, speaking about trade, Canadians know that 2/3 of our economy is powered by trade. We're opening doors for Canadian products to reach new global markets. We signed new trade deals with Ecuador, Indonesia, an investment agreement with UAE, securing $70 billion commitment for more investments in Canada. This is what this government is focused on, is opening new doors and more opportunities for Canadian workers and businesses. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Niagara West.
Mr. Speaker, can the Prime Minister explain to Canadians why every time we ask about a conflict of interest with Brookfield, his answer is basically, who cares? Nothing to see here. Just ignore the fact that I used to run the place. Because Canadians are starting to wonder, if Brookfield were any closer to this government, would it need a visitor's pass or just a set of cabinet keys? So my question is simple. How can Canadians trust decisions aren't being made in the boardroom instead of the House of Commons? Or is this Liberal government now offering loyalty points for conflict of interest?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Financial Institutions.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians made a decision on April 28th between two visions for this country. A vision of hope, a vision of leadership versus slogans and division. Our Prime Minister is a world economic and business leader. He has traveled the world building up relationships and signing deals to build our economy, something that leaders never worked a day in. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Peterborough.
Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we know meaningful consultation with Indigenous right holders is essential to protecting rights, supporting sustainable development, and building respectful long-term relationships. Could the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations share how early and ongoing engagement with Indigenous communities is helping improve our federal approach to consultation?
The Honourable Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All major projects will only proceed after meaningful consultation with Indigenous rights holders. We cannot and will not move forward at the expense of Indigenous rights. Budget 2025 invests $10.1 million in the federal initiative on consultation. This includes funding for consultation protocols, which set out clear, mutually agreed processes for how communities want to be engaged, making consultations more efficient and respectful. We have also invested in Indigenous-led resource centres, which provide the research, technical advice, and expertise communities need.
The Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberals killed the Northern Gateway pipeline project, making Canada more dependent on the U.S. Now this Prime Minister is putting on a big show, but he's setting up another process for a pipeline to fail, with new hurdles and hoops, and worst of all, a massive increase to the industrial carbon tax. The proposed pipeline is never going to happen because this Prime Minister is giving a veto to the BC Premier. But what is guaranteed to happen after April 1st is Albertans will pay a very real and very massive hike to the industrial carbon tax. Why is this Prime Minister more intent on hiking carbon taxes instead of building pipelines?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
It's perplexing to us over here why they keep talking about some supposed veto by the BC Premier when, in fact, of course, we will deal with the people and the province of British Columbia. But what they don't mention is the signature of the Premier of Alberta on a memorandum of understanding that commits us to consulting provinces, consulting First Nations, building out clean and renewable technologies, an electric grid, and building and creating opportunity for young Western Canadians for generations to come. Mr. Speaker.
For Regina Capel.
It doesn't matter how many signatures they put on that MOU if they give a giant veto stamp to the British Columbia Premier, Mr. Speaker. Instead of just repealing all the Liberal leave-it-in-the-ground laws that killed energy projects, this Prime Minister has just unveiled a new process that is designed to fail. He's giving an unconstitutional veto to the BC Premier. He's forcing Albertans to pay billions to put air into the ground, and now he's hiking the industrial carbon tax. Every time the Liberals hike those carbon taxes, everything gets more expensive. Why is this government forcing through a massive hike to the carbon tax instead of just getting out of the way?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
As Canadians watch this debate unfold, Mr. Speaker, they will take note of lines like putting air into the ground. In fact, we are putting carbon into the ground. We are taking it out of the atmosphere, making our production of energy resources less carbon intensive and putting carbon, in fact, underground, therefore committing Canada in the fight against climate change. Mr. Speaker, it's very interesting, and I know Canadians will be following this debate with great interest, and the slogans of the Conservatives will be something that they won't forget.
Honourable Member for Ponoka-Didsbury.
Mr. Speaker, the current Prime Minister was the advisor to the last Prime Minister, and under his watch, no private company was able to build a pipeline. Not TC Energy, not Enbridge, not Kinder Morgan, just the Canadian taxpayer. Now we learn that Alberta must initiate a carbon capture project via the Pathways Alliance in exchange for a pipeline. And who has a significant stake in Entropy, one of the leading Pathways carbon capture companies? Well, it's none other than the Prime Minister's company, Brookfield. Oh, wow. Which begs the question, is the only way anything can be built in Canada is if Brookfield profits?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the owners of the Pathways project for carbon capture and storage are in fact 6 oil and gas companies, all of whom operate in the province of Alberta and employ thousands of...
The Honourable Member for Ponoka-Didsbury.
We know that the Prime Minister has been meeting with Brookfield executives behind closed doors. This is the same Prime Minister who served as board chair of Brookfield Asset Management. And now we learn that he won't allow Alberta to build a pipeline unless it initiates a $16.5 billion carbon capture project where Brookfield profits. The taxes and royalties from a pipeline should be used for doctors, nurses, roads, schools, police, housing, and securing our country. But instead, billions will now pour into the coffers of corporate giants and Liberal insiders, including, of course, Brookfield. How much revenue does the Prime Minister have to divert to his own company before he demands that Canada just simply change its name to Brookfield?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I think the members across, and maybe in particular those members from the province of Alberta, really underestimate how strongly their constituents feel about having a plan to reduce our carbon emissions, reduce the intensity of our energy production, to, yes, lead the world in carbon capture and storage, to build an energy grid throughout Western Canada that makes sure renewable energy gets across Western Canada, and most importantly, they underestimate the hopes of the parents of young Albertans who want to see a future for them in that province, and that's what this thing does today.
The Honourable Member for Cloverdale-Langley City.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's own cabinet and caucus are fighting over this pipeline announcement. Ministers are worried, BC Liberal caucus members are seething and angry, and leaks are coming out by the hour. Meanwhile, Canadians know the real issue. Without a pipeline to the Pacific, the United States is basically our only market for Canadian oil. We cannot reach global buyers until we have coastal access. When will the Prime Minister stop managing caucus drama and start using his authority that he already has to guarantee a pipeline built to the coast?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Labour.
Mr. Speaker, today is an important day because this MOU means jobs in clean energy, jobs building data centers, jobs building the largest carbon capture project in Canada. Mr. Speaker, jobs for young people, good union jobs for the building trades, for the IBW, for the iron workers, for LiUNA, for the UA, for the millwrights, for the workers who build this country every day.
The honourable member for Cloverdale Langley Sitting.
Mr. Speaker, approving a nation-building project like a pipeline to the coast is the Prime Minister's responsibility. It sits squarely in the federal government's hands. But instead of owning that responsibility, the Prime Minister is letting the NDP Premier in BC have a veto. And he's doing it to calm the anger in his own caucus, not to move the country forward. Mr. Speaker, when will the Prime Minister stop hiding behind the NDP Premier and make the call that only his government has the jurisdiction to make?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, that member is a British Columbia MP. Is she seriously suggesting that the people and the government of British Columbia should have no say about a piece of infrastructure that will go across the entire breadth of that province? It's very interesting to me that that member who represents British Columbians would want to subtract the voice of her own provincial government from that debate. For that matter, subtract the voice of First Nations. This is a historic agreement. It sets out a path forward, Mr. Speaker, but we're going to do it the Canadian way, cooperatively.
The honourable member for Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
Mr. Speaker, is the Prime Minister facing open rebellion? A Liberal MP told CBC News that their caucus is seething and angry over a pipeline. No wonder the Prime Minister keeps flip-flopping. One day he's for a pipeline, the next day he claims it's up to BC NDP David Eby. The Constitution is absolutely clear that the sole authority over pipelines is the Prime Minister. Is he breaking his promise to no pipeline David Eby, or will he break his promise to build it through delays, over-regulation, and endless consultations?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, once again, a British Columbia Member of Parliament standing up, wishing to subtract the voice of his own provincial government, the duly elected government of the people of British Columbia, who wish to have a say over a development of infrastructure that would span the entire breadth of that province. I think when that member thinks a little more seriously about this issue, he will agree that cooperative federalism and working with provinces, including Alberta and British Columbia, on things like this historic announcement today are the right way to go.
The honourable member for Peace River, Westlock.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians are looking for collaboration, no doubt, but the Prime Minister went around to wave just another piece of paper that promises a potential pipeline, maybe sometime in the future, but in reality it guarantees nothing. I can tell you that the only thing that was guaranteed today was that Albertans and Canadians will be continuing to pay more with an industrial carbon tax. Mr. Speaker, Canadians are looking for a guarantee. So the simple question is, can the Prime Minister guarantee what year will shovels be in the ground on this proposed pipeline?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, two British Columbian MPs who want to subtract the voice of their provincial government. Now an Albertan MP who questions the wisdom of the Conservative Premier of Alberta, whose signature is still wet on a memorandum of understanding that comprehensively sets out an economic path forward for her province, for the young people who wish to create an economic future for themselves in that province. Mr. Speaker, I'm amazed that these Conservative MPs from British Columbia and Alberta want to deny their own provincial governments the ability to create an economic future in Western Canada.
The honourable member for Airdrie Cochrane.
Well, Mr. Speaker, there is still no construction date for a pipeline, and the Prime Minister blames everyone else. The BC government, the First Nations, anyone but himself. Of course, it's really the leave it in the ground members of his own caucus that are trying to stop it.
Where is Guilbeault anyway?
But the Prime Minister could approve an oil pipeline to the Pacific without a carbon tax, without delays, without any excuses.
Very true.
The proof's in the pudding, and it's not a pipeline until it's built. So will the Prime Minister tell Canadians today, when will shovels be in the ground on this oil pipeline? Just give us a year.
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, it's been interesting to see the Conservatives have a newfound interest in Canada's Constitution. They point out on occasion the federal government has certain authorities in this respect, but they have not taken care to actually read the entirety of the provision they so routinely cite, which similarly empowers provincial governments to actually build the infrastructure necessary to operate a pipeline in this country. They similarly ignore Section 35 of the Constitution, which guarantees the inherent and treaty rights of Indigenous peoples in this country and requires the government to consult with rights holders who may be impacted. We can build this country if we work together. It's a shame the Conservatives, after many opportunities to govern, have failed to learn that lesson.
The honourable member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Hamilton know Canadian steel is an integral part of building a secure, sovereign Canada. Everything from homes to defence requires a strong...
Member, I'll let the honourable member start over, but without gesticulation. The honourable member for Hamilton West, Ancaster Dundas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Hamilton know Canadian steel is an integral part of building a secure, sovereign Canada. Everything from homes to defence requires a strong industrial steel sector. With the announcement yesterday, it's clear that our government is focused on building Canada strong, Canadian steel to build Canadian products, building the strongest economy in the G7. Can the Minister of Jobs and Families...
With me, the honourable member from the top, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The people of Hamilton know Canadian steel is an integral part of building a secure, sovereign Canada. Everything from homes to defence requires a strong industrial steel sector. With the announcement yesterday, it's clear our government is focused on building Canada strong. Canadian steel to build Canadian products, building the strongest economy in the G7. Can the Minister...
Obviously, some members want to hear this over and over again. So from the top.
The people of Hamilton know Canadian steel is an integral part of building a secure, sovereign Canada. Everything from homes to defence requires a strong industrial steel sector. With the announcement yesterday, it's clear that our government is focused on building Canada strong. Canadian steel from Canadian products, building the strongest economy in the G7. Can the Minister of Jobs and Families please tell this House how our government is supporting steelworkers as we transition to buy Canadian industrial self-reliance?
Now we have to hear the answer. So the honourable minister of
finally, Mr. Speaker, Hamilton gets a voice in the
the honourable minister of Jobs and Jobs and Families.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Hamilton gets a voice in the House of Commons with this strong MP who had to repeat his question 4 times. How disrespectful to the workers of Hamilton, who are really struggling and working so hard to pivot to new product and to new markets. And that's why standing beside Dofasco yesterday, Mr. Speaker, one of the backbones of our steel industry here in Canada, and the Prime Minister, as we continue to support that industry to pivot to new markets and to new product, was so important. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we'll listen to the steel industry.
The honourable member for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes.
The Cowichan Court ruling in the British Columbia Supreme Court is causing real damage in Richmond. Banks are pulling back, buyers are walking away, investment is on hold, and families and businesses are being left in limbo. On October 23rd, Richmond Council urgently asked the Attorney General to protect private property rights. This Liberal government didn't even bother to respond. And a few days ago, the Richmond Council passed another motion demanding immediate federal action to mitigate the harm to affected residents. Why is the government abandoning the people whose homes and livelihoods are now at risk?
The Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous
Thank you, Mr.
relations.
Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Canada disagrees with the BC Supreme Court's ruling and appealed it on September 8th. We're reviewing potential legal arguments and all options are on the table. Further legal clarity is required to address the decision, particularly relating to private property rights. We will continue to work collaboratively with all parties to uphold the principles of reconciliation, transparency, and legal responsibility. We remain available for dialogue with the other parties to litigation throughout this process. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Richmond Centre Marpole.
Mr. Speaker, families, farmers and businesses, people who bought and owned property in my community of Richmond are now fearful their titles may no longer be secure because of the convention ruling. Property ownership is one of the core institutions upon which this country is built. This Liberal government's failure to properly fight for and communicate with folks in BC has created an environment of fear and dread that they may soon lose their rights over their own property. What will the minister do to ensure that countless BC residents will not lose their rights as property owners?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our government disagrees with the BC Supreme Court's decision and appealed the decision alongside the Government of British Columbia, the City of Richmond, Musqueam, Tsawwassen, as well as the Cowichan. We absolutely understand the concerns of residents, which is why we've taken this step. We're reviewing potential legal arguments, and all options are on the table. As this case is before the courts, I will not comment any further. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Cowichan, Malahat, Langford.
This appeal will drag out for years. The Cowichan Tribes versus Canada court decision continues to put private property rights at risk. Uncertainty is now escalating into anger and unrest. Landowners are unable to get mortgages, businesses are building facilities in the U.S. instead of BC, and neighbours are turning on each other with verbal threats. Will the Prime Minister finally show some leadership and confirm this appeal will always protect private land title and acknowledge that this is an existential threat to the institution of private property ownership across Canada?
The Honourable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've mentioned multiple times in question period today, as well as past question periods, our government disagrees with the BC Supreme Court decision, and we are appealing it. We are reviewing all options, and as this case is before the courts, I will not comment any further. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Across the country, Canadians are seeing a rise in hate, threats, and intimidation aimed at our communities. If the Conservatives are finally ready to put safety of their own communities first, the Combating Hate Act is right in front of them. Right. Mr. Speaker, can the Minister of Justice tell us what this legislation will mean for the safety of our neighbourhoods, schools, and places of worship?
The Honourable Minister of Justice.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians want this Parliament to take action to combat a rising trend of hate crimes in this country. For our part, we have introduced Bill C-9, the Combating Hate Act, which seeks to protect Canadians by putting in place criminal penalties for those who would commit hate crimes against people, whether on the doorsteps of our religious institutions or in our committees more broadly. This is an important day in the future of this legislation. The Justice Committee will be looking at the specific clauses of this bill after question period today, and Canadians will come to understand which parties are interested in protecting communities against hate and which are more interested in obstructing and delaying this legislation. When Canadians are watching, I hope we can demonstrate a spirit of
The Honourable Member for Calgary Nose Hill.
A senior Liberal debating my bill to stop leniency for non-citizens convicted of serious crimes said this: if someone is going out there and raping another individual, do we really believe that they are going to get special treatment from a judge? Well, the very next day, there was a report of a non-citizen in Barrie being convicted of raping a 13-year-old little girl and impregnating her twice. And the rapist had been given an adjournment to see what impact his guilty plea would have on what? His immigration status. Oh. Will the Liberals admit that they were wrong?
The Honourable Secretary of State for Combating Crime.
Mr. Speaker, there are provisions in place if a non-citizen commits a crime and serves a sentence. Right. They are removed from Canada, Mr. Speaker. CBSA works on these cases, and they prioritize criminal cases, in fact, when making removals. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, this Liberal government is trying to revive a failed bitumen pipeline from Alberta through BC that went nowhere under Stephen Harper's Conservatives and still has no First Nations consent. Talks about ending the oil tanker ban to enable this scheme in an MOU without BC at the table and without coastal First Nations involvement is harming a critical relationship and getting things done. Does this Prime Minister actually realize that pushing a project the coast has already fully rejected is breaking trust with coastal First Nations?
The Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister said it in this House, and I will repeat it because I think it's very important to hear it again. We need to ensure the agreement of British Columbia and of First Nations. That is an important part of how we work forward on building a strong Canada, and I hope that if by repeating it, everyone can make sure that those words are heard.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver East.
At no time during the campaign did the Prime Minister say the tanker ban will be lifted or changed. BC Coastal First Nations is saying loud and clear that the tanker ban is not up for negotiation and no MOU will change that. This secret deal signed behind closed doors without BC and First Nations at the table is a betrayal. Enbridge 2.0 will not proceed without First Nations free, prior, informed consent, and BC will not stand for it. Will the Prime Minister acknowledge that this is the pipeline for nowhere but the courts, and stop wasting everyone's time with this political posturing?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as I believe this is the last question, you can see the span of views in this chamber. It's interesting to me that it is a Liberal government and the Liberal Party that finds the cooperative, consensual way forward. Of course, in response to the member, we will work with and have a duty to consult First Nations. Of course, we will work with and have a duty to work with the province of British Columbia, as we do indeed with the province of Alberta. This is a visionary agreement today, a memorandum of understanding that sets a course for the future of West.
And that's it for today, for question period. I
wish to inform the House that the volume of the earpieces will